Hey everyone, welcome to the Stitching Hour. Today is episode 2. I am Sarah Jamieson and I am the owner of Firefly Fiber Arts Studio. We're an all natural and eco conscious yarn shop in Wicker Park, Chicago. So today I have something that I enjoy reading about and enjoy learning about, and so I want to share all this with you. But today we're going to be talking about the history of the Vikings and how they really cultivated wool and kind of spread it over the world. And then I'll also be featuring all the Shetland wool that we have in the shop and talk about the history of Shetland sheep, Shetland wool, and how it's linked with the Vikings. So let's get started. So I started learning about all of this when I was reading a book called The Golden Thread: How Fabric Changed History by Carissa St. Clair. And that book really opened my eyes. I knew obviously that yarn and fabric and wool had been very important throughout our whole existence, but really knowing just how fundamental it is to the human experience and our history is really amazing. So that's how this all got started. The book is divided up into many different sections. So there's a wool section, there's a Silk Road section, there's a cotton section, and they're really just small snippets of time and just where like big chunks of history really changing because of fabric. So it's not like a complete history, but it's really good introduction. So I started my research in all of this kind of with this book. I'd always been interested, but knowing that there's a specific book I could get to was really awesome. So I will have that book down in the description so that you guys can go back and check it out. It's a really great book if you're looking for something to kind of learn about the history of the world even. It's a really good one. So there it is. But the Vikings, so what we know about the Vikings, at least what I know about the Vikings before I started reading this book, is just that like the Vikings sailed everywhere, looted everywhere, and kind of just colonized everywhere. And that's basically true. So they were travelers, they were masters of the sea. They did loot, they did colonize, but they also were great traders and they would travel all over the world to trade with people. It's really interesting. They colonized, they populated and colonized, but they populated Greenland and Iceland before Vikings. There was no one on those lands. So they populated them. And they then sailed down into Scotland, Wales, Ireland, and England, and kind of colonize that whole area too. You can find them in Spain, anywhere really in the waterways where you can find them. They even did try to colonize what we know as North America, and they tried for a long time, but the natives were not very friendly. It probably didn't help that they called them the wretched people. But they did eventually abandon their colony in North America. And just to let you know, they called what we now call North America, they called Vinland because we had a lot of vines. So Vinland is what it was. But a main theory as to why the Vikings were so aggressively expanding and getting out of their land and colonizing and everything like that is because they had a huge demand for wool. And wool takes a lot of land, and you need a lot of sheep, especially if you're working with Viking sheep. So Viking sheep tend to be smaller, only like as big as like a large dog, which makes me want one now, because if I could keep a dog in my house, I can probably keep a sheep in my house, but I digress. So they're as big as a dog. And they're only about 100 pounds generally. But generally about 100 pounds. And you need a lot of them to make anything of substance, basically. They also had two coats. So they had an undercoat, which was really nice and fluffy. And then they had a overcoat, which is wiry. And so when you sheared the animals or when they shed their coat and you collected their wool, you had two different wools. So again, that means you need a lot more sheep. So they had a huge demand for wool. And so they were really looking for more land. I would even say that because of wool, their culture was able to flourish. So one of the biggest consumers of wool was for the sails of the ships. They would make massive wool sails on their ships, and they would use the outer layer of the sheep's wool, so the harder, wiry stuff, because it had a lot of lanolin in it, which made it waterproof. And so this wool would be woven and then used as sails, which is pretty amazing. But you have to think of these massive, massive ships that have these massive sails on them. And, it could take, 100 sheep just to make one sail. So and it took about a year to make each sail too. So communities would really come together and make these massive sails together. So that was a really, really big consumer of their wool. But I mean, when you live, in Scandinavia and it's cold almost all the time of the year, wool, it basically helps you survive. So they made everything out of wool. There are records that sailors on Viking ships would bring 3 changes of underwear, a shirt, 5 pairs of sea mitts. So those are the waterproof ones, 2 pairs of regular mitts, and a similar number of leggings and socks. So that's a lot of clothes, and all of that was made out of wool, and it was either a form of crochet woven or a primitive way of knitting, which is called nail binding. And that they think that that's where knitting evolved from. So all of this had to be made. All of this had to be cultivated. And so they needed more land. They needed more sheep and more land for more wool so that they could, really have their culture thrive. I would also say that another reason why their culture really did thrive for a long time is because they did hold women to high regard. And I think one of those big reasons is because women did a lot of working with wool. They made a lot of the pieces. And when you have something that, you need to survive and you respect the people who make them, I mean, that's a pretty big thing. But that's just a theory. And I'm not an expert on that, but I have a feeling that could be also part of it. So all of this really took a lot of labor and it took a lot of land. And so the Vikings, there were explorers. They went and explored and they went and conquered and colonized and put sheep everywhere, basically. And so that brings us to Shetland sheep. So they brought over all these sheep to different isles in Scotland, especially up in the Northern Isles. The thing about Viking sheep is that they were mostly wild. And so they would probably only see their handlers about 3 times a year. And that was so that they could, get the wool, and that's about it. Their coats did naturally shed. And so they would shear them, but then they would also collect the undercoat by just combing the sheep, basically. So they would put these animals on these islands and then come back to them about 3 times a year and collect all the wool. And so these animals had to fend for themselves. So luckily for them, Viking sheep were pretty hardy and able to survive in different conditions that they kind of threw them into. So they put a specific sheep, they put sheep onto what is now called the Shetland Isles in Scotland. And those sheep stayed there for hundreds of years, and they are now a breed of sheep called the Shetland Sheep. And that's what we're going to be talking about. Like I said, they're small. So Shetland sheep are pretty small still. they're still basically wild, even if they have people who care for them. They're pretty clever. They're friendly. Also, they're friendly and clever, and they come in all different colors, all different patterns, colors, and so they are very versatile, and which is really great. They have some of them have been bred to only have one coat, but most of them still have two coats. And so they have the top layer, which is, good for making anything that is outerwear. It's a little bit hardier. And then they have the under layer, which is softer. Shetland sheep actually used to be endangered. And then in 1927, a group was formed in the Shetland Islands to try to keep them from being bred out. And then in I think the 1960s, when the endangered species list kind of came about, they were on that endangered species list, but now they are considered thriving. So, and that has a lot to do with the fact that conservationists have really tried to keep them around, but also because people like us really love their wool and we really value what their wool can do for us. So that's the history, a very short history of Vikings and Shetland wool, which I think is really fascinating. And I really love knowing where this comes from. So we have Shetland wool in our shop right now. And it's really cool to think that this is an ancient wool. It's changed, but not really that much from when the Vikings were using it. So it's really cool to know that this is an ancient wool that people have been using for thousands of years. And that's pretty awesome. So I'm going to show you guys what we have in the shop right now. We just got in some Jamiesons of Shetland wool. And I will admit part of that was because my last name is Jamieson and I thought it'd be cool to have a Jamieson's in the shop. Also because I do love the colors and that they come in these small 25-gram skeins. So this is really cool. It's great for color work, fair isle knitting, or if you just need a little bit of anything. And we have about 20 colors. So I'll show that to you. And also our trunk show from Oysters and Purls has 100% Shetland wool skeins, full-size skeins, which are pretty awesome. They're botanically dyed and they feel really cool. So we're going to talk about that. Let's dive in. So first I'm going to show you guys the Jamieson wool. So they have these small 25-gram skeins. There they are. And like I said, we have about 20 colors in the shop. What I absolutely love about this wool is just the variety of colors. It's beautifully spun. I don't know if you guys can see how many colors are in that, but it's beautifully spun and it has these gorgeous colors. And I love it. I think that it can make a really, really fun Okay, let's start with the Jamieson wool. I'm going to show you guys, these are their 25-gram skeins. This is their Spindrift, which is a fingering weight, and it has about 105 meters on there. And so it's a little bit more in yards. I don't know if you guys can see, but the variation of this color, this is paprika. The variation of this color is gorgeous. It's beautiful. And it's one of the things I really like about their line. They have some that are more or less one color, but then you can even see, even then, it's not just one color. It's still a beautiful variation. So this one's pine. I really like this one too. We have about 20 colors, but they all kind of come together. This is my favorite. So Jackie put these colors together, and of course, I absolutely love these colors together. So hold on, so you can see. There we go. All right, so Jackie put these colors together, and I really love it. So this one's called Sunrise, and it's a beautiful deep red. This one is salmon, very pretty pink, um, pink blended with white. And then we have pine, which is a beautiful like forest green. So I really love these three together. I imagine myself making a garden color work something. So one day I will use you three, I promise. Can't add it to my stash though because it's really big. It's the whole store. So, and then this one, I really love this color. This color is called Autumn, and I think it's one of their newer colors. I also got it in their Aran weight. So I'll tell you guys about their Aran weight, but I just love how many colors are represented in this. A deep midnight. It's actually called Cosmos, but it's beautiful. It's a very deep blue. This is one of their colors that is all natural. So you can see the variation in that. And then we do have about 3 different purples. So if you're a purple lover, we have 3 different purples. This one's Loganberry. It's one of my favorites. It's more of a red purple, but I really like it. So those are just a little bit of the small skeins. And I would say, you know, it's a pretty rustic wool, which Shetland is. It's a rustic wool, but, you know, it's great for color work for mittens. It's great for hats. It's great for a yoke on a sweater. So it's really lovely. And I don't think that it would be too scratchy. But you know, everyone has their level of what they like. But I do think that it would lay against the skin pretty nice. So I really like that. So that's our 25 grams Spindrift. Perfect for color work, or if you're working on a smaller project, or you just need like some stripes. It really is great. And we have a wide range of colors. And then I also got their Shetland Heather, and this is their Aran weight. And this is a 50 gram skein, about 92 meters, so just a little bit over in yards. So this is one of their natural colors. So this is undyed. This is just what the sheep look like. And it's a really beautiful gray. We have some more gray too. I showed you guys the autumn. I just really loved this color and thought that it would make a beautiful sweater, really, putting this all together. So I love the variation. So I thought this would be a good sweater. So I got enough for a sweater quantity. And same with this color. This one's really great too. It's a beautiful green. Again, it has a little bit of variation in it. And so it's not flat. That's the thing I do like about all of the Jamieson wool. It will never just be flat color. It will have depth to it, and I really like that. All right. So next we have Oysters and Purls. Oysters and Purls is our trunk show for this month. This is September 2020. So Oysters and Purls is our trunk show, and we're really excited to have her in. It's all natural wool, and she botanically dyes it, which is, if you guys don't know, it's really hard to do that. And so it's amazing that she does this and sustains her business this way. And they're really beautiful colors. So we're going to talk about that. I'm also going to have an interview with her on Instagram Live. So be aware of that. We're going to do that pretty soon. Okay, so these are her skeins. They are 100 grams, so they're about 400 yards, and it's 100% Shetland wool. And it's comes from sheep here in the US, which is really interesting. Shetland wool generally stayed in the Shetland Isles for a really long time. They did come to the US. I think George Washington had some. And there were some little farms that had them, but then they did die out in the US for a long time. And that's because Shetland sheep were not exported. And then in the 70s, I think they were like not allowed. I don't quite know the history on this one, but I don't think they were allowed to be exported in the US for a while. But somehow they got moved from the Shetland Isles to Canada, and then from Canada they came down. So, but now, I mean, now everything's fine, and there are farms in the U.S. that have Shetland wool, and that does help the conservation too. So this is all grown and spun in the U.S. and then botanically dyed by Oysters and Purls. This is her colorway Fire, and it's a fingering weight. And it's really pretty. And this has subtle changes in it too. And I don't think you can see it, but there's these little wool hairs sticking out that are black, that are different than the wool that is dyed. And it does make a really interesting colorway. And it does give it a little bit of depth. So, and again, the feel, I actually would say that this is a little bit softer than the Jamieson. It does have a really nice feel. It still is a rustic, hardy wool, but I would say, it feels pretty squishy. Yeah, I really like it. So she has 3 colorways. So that was Fire. This one is Air. It's a beautiful gray. It would make, a great sweater. It would like a base on a sweater. So this one is really pretty. It would match up with our Shetland really well. So if you wanted to make a sweater that had some color work yoke, but then you needed a base and didn't want to buy all of the mini skeins for a base, this would be a good way to still have 100% Shetland wool sweater with Oysters and Purls. So we have this beautiful gray, and then you can pair it up with a Jamieson and make a really pretty sweater or shawl or anything like that. And then this is her colorway Earth, which is really pretty. It's a little bit lighter, and all botanically dyed. So that's what we have about Shetland wool. We have the Jamieson and Spindrift. We also have it in the Shetland Heather, Aran Weight, and then we have some from Oysters and Purls, which is a beautiful fingering botanically dyed Shetland wool, 100% Shetland wool. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about the Vikings and Shetland sheep, and then also knowing where this wool comes from and its history, which is really fun and exciting. It is for me. So let me know in the comments below if you guys have any questions. Let me know if you like working with Shetland wool, if you've made anything out of it. I would love to know. And be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, Firefly Fiber Arts. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can see more of the Stitching Hour. And I'll make sure to have all the information on the yarns I just shared with you in the description below. So I'll see you guys next time. Thanks. Bye.